Element classes are a basic building stone in the Dragon Gin game engine. Basically, an element class is simply any kind of object you can add to a scene, which, in contrary to prefab systems, which are like just grouping objects together, they are real entities which are built using behaviors. This gives them much more possibilities, much more stability, easier to work with, and easier to extend and reuse than prefab systems. So this is the example app in which I have, for example, this custom color example cube. A cube by itself, you can either define with a script class. This is what happens here. That's the typical way of doing it. You create a subclass of something like simple element or directly of behavior element, and then add your behaviors you want to use to this element class. So every instance of this class shares the same behaviors, but everything is one object, one instance, not split into 1,000 tiny objects you have to manage. So that's the classical way. Usually you have to define element classes with the behaviors. That's the logic part. But then you can go and extend these objects using e-classes, star.de class or Dragon Gin XML element class. So this is a unique feature of the Dragon Gin, where you can use an XML file to create new element classes, which are subclass of another one, and simply changing properties of the element class to create a new variation or a new element class with new abilities. You share the same behaviors. So the behavior that you use for the new class is still the same behaviors that the base class has defined. For example, in case of the custom class, the simple element base class is used and these behaviors have been added. While in this case, I'm just using simple element class and modifying the behaviors they have done. While this is already a cool system and very versatile, it would be interesting if you would be able to define behaviors also inside XML files. Then you would not have to create a new XML, a new element class for every new element class with a new logic and add it to the available element classes, but you might be able to do it right in an XML file. And this is what this update is adding. So let's go to the basic example. This cube you are seeing here and the properties that you are able to select here is defined with this script class. With the new system, you can now use a so-called generic behavior element class. Generic behavior element class is actually nothing else but a behavior element which has the ability that you can add behaviors through XML subclassing. Every element, behavior element class, even the ones you create yourself, can be modified and extended to accept behaviors to be added through XML. And you can also influence that process. So the generic behavior element by itself is a game engine provided element class, which simply uses all possible behaviors or simply allows all possible behaviors which the game engine provides. So it's like a jack of all trades class that you can immediately use to create your extended element classes, but you have the possibility to create your own element classes in script and modify the list of behaviors you are allowed to define or to add in an XML file. This then allows to control what you can do. So you can say, I do not want to allow every behavior to be added. And this affects artists in the team, which are creating the game, as well as modders, which like to modify your game. So you can there take a lot of influence on what you want to allow, up to the situation where you say, I do not allow XML behaviors to be used at all. That's up to you. So how does it work? In this example, I've created an XML element class, which I called extended custom color, which is basically replicating this script class, but using XML notation. So we have here a bunch of behaviors like a dynamic skin, a renderable canvas, a bunch of custom color behaviors, in addition to what the simple element class is already giving us, as well as a couple of behaviors which we are only adding and not keeping track of. So this, what is written here, can be created just by using an XML file without touching script code at all. And it would look like this. It's a little bit more verbose here, since this is in the example project with a bunch of comments, so you can read it and get a little bit more information on what's going on. Otherwise, it would be shorter than that. Basically, what is new compared to the existing system where you simply define properties is that you can now add behaviors with this behavior tag. There you have to say which type you want to use. The type is actually a free name, but I've put up the rule that you use the class name of the behavior as type. This way, the EDD is also able to recognize the behaviors you've defined in the XML and use it properly. So basically what I do here, I'm just taking a few examples, the rest you can look at yourself. I've added a component behavior which gives the visual presence, and I've defined some properties. Basically what I've done in this line of XML file is the same as I've done here. Usually I would have to say the property is the property prefix of the behavior I want to modify and the name of the property I want to modify. Especially with more complex systems, these prefixes can be a bit longer, especially if different IDs are used. So I've made it possible that you can also add property definitions inside the behavior tag. And it is important that you start it with a period, with a dot. Because this means, okay, I want to define an element class property or set the value of an element class property, but please append the prefix of this behavior in front of the name. So you do not have to remember the prefix of the component. So in this case, it would simply add component before the period. So let's have a quick look. For example, you see here, this would be a little bit a longer prefix. So if you wanted to find usually something like this property, you would have to write renderable custom color in parentheses, the identifier of the behavior, and so forth. With the behavior defined in an XML file, you could just write point image and the rest in front of it, it simply appends for you. This makes it easier to write the properties of a behavior you've just added, less error prone, and in general, just better if you can do it that way. You still can define properties afterwards the regular way, nobody's stopping you, but using this kind of system, it's easier. So then I've also added, for example, the collider for a physical presence. And here it's also marked that when you add a behavior using the XML system, it also automatically searches for already added behaviors this new behavior depends upon. So in the case of the collider behavior, for example, it looks if you have already added a behavior component, and if so, attaches to it. So this way you have to write less XML code to achieve the same you have to do in the script classes by adding the necessary behaviors yourself. So like here you have to say, okay, I want to use that behavior with XML. This can be detected automatically for you. Same, adding a navigation space, so I can add a blocker. And this would have been what a simple element gives us. And here we would start with the behaviors that the custom element class has added, like, for example, a behavior custom color. This is the same as I've done here. So this would be the script code version, or I take this one here. This is the script code version, and this is the same in the XML notation. Then we can add some more stuff to it. The rest is simply the script behaviors written in the form of XML. Here you see a little bit a change. Here is a period, but here is not. This simply means that what is not a period is a parameter which is required to create a new behavior. In this particular case, this means if I want to create or add a renderable custom color behavior, I am required to give it a custom color behavior to work on. And the custom color behavior is different for each of the behaviors I've added. And for this reason, I have to tell him, okay, for this behavior, I want to use the custom color behavior which I added with the identifier color1. And you will find it here. So this way I can say, okay, I am depending on this behavior using using the parameters which do not have a dot in front of it. So that's pretty much what is. At this point, I have now replicated the entire custom color example class from here with purely an XML file. I can do this without touching any code, without touching the editor. I can create these files by hand. I can write tools that automate the process of creating these files. If you want to, you can make a Blender exporter, Python script which creates these files. Because they are text files, you can just put them in your system, in your project folder, and it just works. No importing into the editors, no editor needed to create these files. But the editor does recognize these files in your project. So here he has detected, I have an extended custom color, which is this one here. And it is able to detect all the behaviors that I have added to it, as well as recognizing the values that you have defined for it. So that's the most fast and easy way you can add a new element class to your project, which relies on behavior logic that you have created yourself or is provided by the game engine. So in this particular case, I am using also a so-called behavior choose colors. This is a behavior that I have created in the example project. It's actually this file here. A typical behavior which does some work. And to make a behavior usable for XML subclassing, you just need to create a factory which you can copy paste from the behaviors the game engine provides and adapt it for you. And this factory has just one or two functions actually. One is the name of it, where the rule is use the name of the behavior class, but actually it's a free name. And the add behavior function, which is required to create and add the behavior to the element class, which is pretty much what happens here. And then we have also a little bit stuff. We can use parameters to modify the behavior that we added. and we can let the game engine populate the properties defined inside the tag as element class properties. So that's a helper code you can use to make it easy for you. Once you have this factory defined, you have now in your base game app subclass, you have a new method which is called create and add behavior factories. This way, in this function, all the behaviors that are supported are added to a public list. In this case, a behavior factory list. And here I simply add the behaviors I've defined in my project to this list. And everything that is in this list is automatically usable by this generic behavior element. If I want to, I can customize this and create my own classes where I add my own list of factories tailored for each element class if the need arises. Otherwise, the most simple solution is just put everything in this method in the public list and you can use it. There is no more work required for it to be working. So to show a little bit quickly how this can be extended and how fast it is to work with it, I have here now these two cubes, which look like this. If I run the example, so these are the two cubes here, which are which have been used to show how you can manipulate the colors of an object. And this element class cube has exactly the same behavior, although I've written it just in an XML file without the use of script classes. But I can now go on and say, okay, I have now made this extended color. It would be cool if I put a light on it. So I can say, okay, I quickly add a light behavior light. I give it some parameters like the intensity, what color it has, and I position it a little bit at the bottom and in front of the instance which I've created. So now I've changed the file, and if I reload the files, I see, oh, I have now obtained a light in front of it, which technically I could also modify. Like I've got here a light, I could say, oh, yep, where's this color? Let's make this, let's say, more like this, and becomes green. So without touching any script code, without doing any complicated mess in the engine or dealing with prefabs or whatever, I've just written a couple of lines in an XML file and it just works. So, yep, that is nice, but maybe a little more. What about adding quickly a particular meter? Actually, I'm adding now two particular meters. One is a little flame on top of the object, in front of it, and the second one, which is a little bit above it, is a smoke emitter. So, okay, let's reload again. Let's see. Now we have a little bit of fire and smoke on my box, which is an element class. So it's not a single object which I've modified. I've modified an object class, which makes it much faster to work than messing with a prefab. And again here, I have obtained new particular meters. I could change them directly if I want to. And to make the finisher line, let's also put a speaker on it with a little sound of it, a little crackling sound, which I could switch on, as you can hear it on the top. So I have now also received a little speaker, which is here, with the sound file I've defined. And since this is now a class, I can easily create a new class and change these values. Let's, for example, put it a little bit here. And let's say this is, let's take the light color again. And let's make this a little bit blue. So, and the nice part is these are really living element classes and living objects. So I can just change that and that's it. I could have created these modifications without even touching the editor. And then I could just reuse and create new objects like this. So, what's the nice thing on this system? First of all, I can define scripts, behavior element classes with the help of XML, which I could do before already, but I can also define behaviors in it. So I can not only modify the logic that I have defined in a script class, I can add new logic and modify it directly in the XML file. I do not need to use the editor for this. I can easily copy paste behaviors between files, which is a lot easier. I can also very easy comment out or even document certain things in my XML class, which you can do with these prefab systems in other engines, because you have the UI and to read this is a mess. Here, you can define your own documentation scheme. You can also make some test values and comment them out to see if it works. So it's much faster to iterate your designs, much faster to work with logic, try out new logic, modify versions, make a copy of something. Or let's say I have created a couple of behaviors, make quickly a duplicate and add another one. Or in the case of a particular method, try it out, make a new one, quickly test it. It's much faster, much more stable, much more versatile in the end. And that's what you can now do with the new system. The documentation for this you find either in the script classes themselves. So for example, if you're looking at a behavior, then you will have in the file itself the factories, which then also give you copy-paste code which you can use with the documentation how it works. And you can look at the wiki pages, which also contain the documentations for the individual behaviors and how you can use it. So have fun with this new feature and can create quickly your dream projects with it without all the hassles of prefab systems, no need to deal with editors. You can just use XML files to do the mundane and quickly and boring work to work fast.